The Super Bowl is over, and pitchers and catchers are going to report to spring training this week. It's officially baseball season, and we're going to give you our first crack at predicting the Giants' opening day roster. And guess what? I've got a huge notable omission.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide episodes every day, Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, it is baseball season. As I said, the Super Bowl's over. Pitchers and catchers are going to report this week. And then the games get underway a week from Friday, spring training games. And then, of course, the WBC happens in kind of early to mid-March. And so that's all something to look forward to, but we're going to take our first crack. I know a lot of other reporters, journalists have done this at predicting the Giants opening day roster. We're going to do this now. We'll do it at some point during the spring, and of course we'll do it once they finally get that roster out there. But today we're going to talk about the position players, and I'm going to start off with what I said. I've got a controversial omission, and it's just kind of to make a point, and we'll kind of move around the diamond here and start at the catcher position, which is, to me, the most unsettled position. There are some other ones, for sure. First base, third base is different for the first time in a long time, with no Belt and Longoria on this roster anymore. But at the catcher position, this is where there's just a lot of unknowns. And what do we know? We know that Joey Bart is, of course, still... he's currently the only catcher on the 40-man roster, unless you count Blake Sabol, who we'll talk about in just a second. But for Joey Bart, let's just go back and look at what did he do in 2022. Well, he had these huge stretches where he was striking out close to half the time. And so when all was said and done with his 2022 season, he struck out 38.5% of the time, which is just too high. And when you're projecting into 2023, I keep saying this, they're not going to tolerate more of that. And I will also point this out. It seems that this gets lost on almost everyone every year, but Joey Bart consistently dominates in spring training. And so I would expect him to dominate again, which probably, look, the Giants aren't going to make their decision based on your spring training stats, but just keep in mind, he usually hits really well in spring training. It's a highly, offensive environment. Guys are just kind of getting ready, and they're not trying to strike you out on every pitch, get you to swing and miss, chase on every single pitch. Sometimes they're just working on their fastball command and whatever. But for Joey Bart, here's the thing, is that he had these stretches during the season where he was he started out striking out close to half the time. He got sent down, he came back up, and he really looked like he had not solved that, but largely improved upon his strikeout rate. But then towards the end of the year, sadly to say, if you look at the rolling strikeout rate, so in the middle of the season, around August 20th, I guess late in the season, his rolling kind of 15-game strikeout rate was just 20.8%. Now, if he can do that, that is a huge deal. But by the end of the year, October 5th, he had a rolling 15-game strikeout rate of 48.8%. That means his most recent 15 games, his average strikeout rate was about 50%. It was literally 49% rounded. And that's exactly the high level it was at for various stretches throughout the season. And so, yes, he initially improved upon being called back up from the minors, but towards the end of the year, it was right back to that alarming level. And they just will not deal with that, I don't think, anymore. And the prospect shine, I don't want to say it's completely worn off, but at a certain point, they're trying to win games. And also keep in mind that Joey Bart did not catch Carlos Rodon down the stretch. He didn't catch Logan Webb very often down the stretch either. And so this quote, courtesy of Susan Slusser from Gabe Kapler at FanFest, Gabe Kapler says, quote, "We've got some options at the catching position. I don't think anything is clear cut. I'm just giving you a heads up on that. These guys are going to come in and compete for both playing time and roster spots." And so my hot take is just that we're kind of, I'm seeing a lot of assumptions. People are saying, like, who's going to be the backup to pair with Joey Bart? Well, Joey Bart has to earn that role. They are not just going to hand him this role where you're the main catcher when the performance just hasn't been there. And so I'm not giving up on him, but I am saying that is just not going to happen, I don't think, where they're just going to be like, okay, well, sink or swim with this. I think that they've got some other options. And so my hot take is that perhaps Joey Bart gets optioned to start the season, and he does have one minor league option remaining. The issue there is they would have to add someone to the 40-man because, or two guys potentially. They've got Blake Sabol, like I said, the Rule 5 pick. He has to make the roster or be offered back. And so this is one of those cases where you could see them, okay, saying we want to give this guy a shot, sending Joey Bart down, keeping Blake Sabol on the roster, and then I think Roberto Pérez is more likely than pretty much anybody on the roster right now. He's actually a minor league signing, makes $2.5 million if he's in the majors, with another $1.5 million in incentives available to him. But of all their catchers in camp, basically, I actually think Roberto Pérez might be the more likely to make the opening day roster even than a Joey Bart. And so perhaps that's a hot take. Perhaps it's not. But I think Roberto Pérez makes it. And just to prove a point or to make a point, I'm going to say that Bart actually gets optioned and that Blake Sabol makes the roster. I am not confident in that. And that's why, it's February 13th. It's not April 1st here. And so just throwing that out there. So coming up in just a minute, we are going to move on and move more quickly through some of the other positions, getting to, like I said, first and third base are brand new uncharted waters for the Giants here without Brandon Belt and Evan Longoria. So what are they going to do? Who are going to be the players to make that opening day roster? We'll get into it in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on anything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. I'm just currently looking at the Warriors game tonight, playing the Washington Wizards, and the Warriors, I like them to cover the point spread. That's what I'm looking at right now. Warriors at home just have been a much better team, and they just need to win by 3, and they cover the point spread there. So I like that for tonight. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, as promised, we are going to continue running through. I know that some people give me grief for being hard on Joey Bart, and it's nothing personal, I promise you. It's just literally rolling rates, like long stretches, couple week stretches where we're talking about a 50% strikeout rate. That's pitcher territory, like pitchers hitting territory. And I hope he succeeds, and I believe that he can, and he showed improvement in some areas last year. But I just am challenging the notion people are just handing him this playing time. And Gabe Kapler, I'm also just going by what Gabe Kapler said there. He's like, I'm just giving you a heads up. Nothing is clear cut. So just thought that was worth kind of pointing out. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. I know he recently talked about the Giants, so check out Locked On MLB Prospects with Lindsey Crosby. So moving along, we can't spend quite that much time on every position, but the first base position is almost just as interesting in that for the first time in a long time, since 2011, Brandon Belt is not in the mix here. Brandon Belt, of course, signing with the Toronto Blue Jays, and the plan appears to be that LaMonte Wade Jr., because I'm thinking that first series of the year in New York, You're going to face Garrett Cole probably on opening day, and then you're probably facing Rodon. So there's a righty and then there's a lefty. But I'm thinking to that righty, Cole, you're probably going to see LaMonte Wade Jr. start at first base. And so I'm not super confident in this move, this decision, this plan to have LaMonte Wade Jr. be the primary first baseman. But we're looking at a platoon here at first base, at a position where when Belt was at his best, he was not being platooned. And so, yes, they cut down on some platoons in the outfield. I think you're going to see Conforto and Haniger probably play pretty much every day. Although Conforto against a tough lefty, you may not see him start. That remains to be seen. But with Wade, he's not going to be starting against left-handed pitchers. And so I think Wade, to begin the year, is like a guaranteed roster spot for sure. And then it's probably a platoon with one of these other guys like J.D. Davis and David Villar and Wilmer Flores. So we'll kind of, I guess, talk about, it's not exactly clear which of those three would be the platoon partner there, but I do believe it would be one of those three, Flores, Davis, or David Villar. I think David Villar probably is at third base, so we'll get to him in a minute. So probably Davis or Flores would be the guy who kind of starts that second game in New York against Carlos Rodon at first base. So moving on to second base, I just want to give a shout out to Thairo Estrada, who quietly had a very nice season in 2022 for the Giants, hit 14 homers, stole 21 bases, and was by some measures their best position player. And if you look at projections for him, projected to be a guy who gets close to 20 homers and steals and kind of above average offensively across the board. I keep saying this. I'm going to keep saying this. By one measure, defensive runs saved, Thairo Estrada had a miserable defensive season in 2022, but by outs above average, he was not nearly that bad. By ultimate zone rating, he was not that bad. And in years past, by defensive runs saved, he hasn't been that bad. And so I think we're overreacting to a one-season sample of poor defense by one metric for one player. And these kind of metrics are imperfect, they're not precise, and they're best taken, in a broader context, kind of zoom back, zoom out, look at the big picture, see, is this consistent? Is this consistent across different metrics? And for Estrada, the answer is no there. And in fact, if you look at, at shortstop, it basically says he was a better defender at short than he was at second, which doesn't really make sense. And so, yeah, I'm not sold that he's a below average defender. And I think that he kind of has earned the right. He'll be 27 later this month. He's a young player. He's under club control for like 4 more seasons. He's pretty much going to be given an opportunity to continue to be an everyday player. And so for those who don't like the platoons, here's one of your everyday guys in Thairo Estrada. Oh, and just by the way, Roberto Pérez, the catcher on the minor league deal, who I think is very likely to make that roster, we talk about, he can't hit, his career numbers are horrible. But actually, if you look at his numbers against lefties, he's more than held his own, lots of power, above average overall kind of offensive production when he's facing left-handed pitchers in his career. And so I think that that's another reason Sabol as a left-handed hitter and Pérez as a right-handed hitter, you could see a platoon there. Don't worry, there are positions coming up that are not to be platooned, as I've made the case a million times. You can't platoon at even close to every position on the field. 9 positions, including the DH, 9 including the pitcher, and times 2 per position would be 18 hitters, and they're only going to have like 13. And so definitely not platooning at a handful of spots. So the next position on the diamond, technically, if we're scoring at home, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be third base as the 5th numbered position there. So we'll do third base next and shortstop after that. But third base, another big deal here because Evan Longoria signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks. And so he's not going to be here for the first time in 5 years. And I think that they're going to give David Villar the first crack at this spot. Now, if he just struggles in spring, he's another guy who had some strikeout issues, not quite to the level of Joey Bart. Villar's strikeout rate in the majors last year was 32%. Bart's was 38.5. I think that Villar is kind of on the fringe of too high. Bart is beyond that line with 38.5%. And Villar, he talks about this himself. In-zone swing and miss was an issue for David Villar, and so I think he needs to clean that up. But he was also good at not chasing out of the zone too much and kind of doing damage as well, hitting for power. And so I do believe Villar is going to get that first crack at the third base position, but they've got some insurance here on the roster in the form of J.D. Davis and Wilmer Flores. And so those are kind of your backup third baseman, so to speak. And then they've got Casey Schmidt is going to probably start the year in AAA. He's going to be in Major League camp. And so if Schmidt starts the year on fire and Villar gets an opportunity but struggles for several weeks, you could see them kind of flip-flopped on the roster, or you just might see Flores or Davis at third base. But I don't love that defensively, and so that's where Schmidt comes into play. So it's a little bit unsettled there at third base, but that's the way I see it to start the season. So then at shortstop, no surprise here. We're looking at Brandon Crawford, another likely opening day start against his brother-in-law Garrett Cole in New York. And for Crawford, I mean, it was definitely a down year coming off his fourth place MVP season in 2021, which is just incredible. At age 34, he put up monster numbers. 38% above average offensively by weighted runs created plus, was really good defensively. Last year, below average offensively, and the defense at times wasn't great, but towards the end of the year, it was great after going on the IL to heal up a knee issue he was having. And so I look for Crawford to be just a solid player in 2023. If he can get back to being anything close to what he did in 2021, that would be gravy. But I would look for him to just be maybe a little bit better than he was last year, but not an MVP caliber player, but to provide kind of at least solid defense, and hopefully he can get back to being more than that. But he is going to be 36. He just turned 36. So it could be getting close to the end of the line for Crawford, who's entering his last year of his contract. So this could be the final season for Crawford, maybe in his career. I don't know. It depends on how this season goes, but he is 36 and it's the last year of the contract. So coming up in just a minute, the Giants outfield, what am I projecting at that outfield? By the way, Thairo Estrada would be the backup shortstop in this case. So we'll get into the outfielders, the new guys, Mitch Haniger, Michael Conforto. How do they fit in? We'll get into it in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you've got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know that my goal every year is to eat a little bit healthier. And with Built, it is so much easier to do because their bars taste like candy bars. You don't feel like you're sacrificing taste when you want to eat healthy, but healthy you are eating, if that makes any sense. With these amazing macros, in a typical bar, only about 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar. That is low. With a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait around to get a box. You can head to your nearest Walmart or Sam's Club. Go to Walmart today, go to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're near Sam's Club, you can walk in and get a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie, batter, and churro. You can thank me later. All right, here we go. We're going to continue wrapping it up. I'm going with 13 position players here, an even split of 13 position players, 13 pitchers to start the season. And later this week, which we're back to daily now, Monday through Friday, we're going to look at what I estimate to be the pitching group. And it's pretty interesting because they have so many starting pitchers. And then how's that going to work with the bullpen mix that they have? So getting to the outfield and also the DH spot, I believe, I don't think it's hard to predict here that Michael Conforto is going to be in left field. He's coming off a shoulder surgery, so he's played left and right in his career, as has Mitch Haniger. But given that Conforto had a serious shoulder issue that caused him to miss all of last season, the arm is a little more important in right field, and so it makes sense just to put Conforto in left. So there you go, another different opening day left fielder in Michael Conforto, likely on opening day. And then in center, I think against a right-handed pitcher like Garrett Cole, you're going to see Mike Yastrzemski. Now, I think people are too down on Mike Yastrzemski. I saw a piece, I won't call out the publication, but the title of the story was something about Yaz's awful 2022. And that is just such an exaggeration when you look at the numbers. I think we're overrating batting average in this case. If you're talking about that he was awful, like our standards for what's awful, it's kind of like the Giants season last year. Was it awful or was it average? And I think that relates to Yastrzemski's season perfectly. It wasn't awful. It was average. His weighted runs created plus 100 is league average, and Yastrzemski was at 99. And so that suggests one tick below league average offensively. The batting average was just 214, but an above average walk rate had him at a 305 on base, which is, I think, a little bit below average. But then he hit for above average power, a 177 isolated power, 392 slugging. But more importantly than the slugging itself is the difference between the slugging and the batting average. And that was 177. And so overall, it was roughly a league average picture. But if you look at the numbers against righties, it was better than league average. And then he provides good defense and base running speed, essentially. He hit 17 home runs even in this down year. I mean, it was a down year. It was disappointing, but it was more mediocre than awful. I think that we use that word too much. So I would expect more of the same, hopefully a rebound to an extent for Mike Yastrzemski after a couple of disappointing seasons, given that he set the bar pretty high in his first 2 years. And I didn't really talk about Conforto, but Conforto has had some monster seasons in his career, and coming off this injury, I think if you're looking for like big upside on the position player side, it might come from Michael Conforto first and foremost. And he's playing for this opt-out at the end of the year, and so motivated to have a big season, opt out. People say, oh, and then for sure the Giants won't re-sign him. I wouldn't be so sure. He's from the West Coast. The Giants' track record of this, I think, probably more so relates to pitchers. They haven't done this much with these opt-outs with hitters. And if Conforto has a good year and likes it here, I wouldn't be shocked if he's the type of guy they want to bring back. I think we shouldn't just assume the Giants won't ever want to bring guys back. Think about they wanted to bring back Jock Peterson, right? And they got him to come back on a 1-year deal. So anyway, that's Conforto and Yastrzemski. And I think in right field, you're going to see Mitch Haniger as an everyday guy as well. If you look at his career offensive splits, above average against righties and lefties. And he's had some up and down defensive seasons, as has Conforto. But I've looked into this and posted about it on Twitter. But both of these guys have been above average in their careers when they're playing in the corners in the outfield, left and right. But in center, I think they've both been below average, but they don't figure to play much center. And so I think that the Giants' outfield defense was horrible last season. And so to go from horrible to mediocre would be a huge improvement. I think that we're sleeping on just because you didn't become excellent, maybe, doesn't mean it wasn't a big improvement. If you go from what they were to average, I think that's a huge improvement, actually. So anyway, I think in right field, similar to Michael Conforto, Mitch Haniger has had some monster seasons, has been good defensively at times, and so you're not entirely sure what you're going to get from either of these guys, Conforto or Haniger, but they both have the potential to be impact players. I wouldn't rely on that. I think that's kind of the 90th percentile outcome, but the average kind of outcome is that they're solid, good, everyday type players. Conforto has bigger splits and has sometimes struggled against lefties, so we'll see how that shakes out. But the other outfielder here who's in that kind of platoon role with either Haniger with Conforto or Yastrzemski is Austin Slater. And so I kind of view it as they're really going with 4 outfielders, but you've got guys like Jock Peterson on the roster, who we'll talk about in a second, and Thairo Estrada potentially on the roster, able to play the outfield if needed. And so it really kind of looks like 4 outfielders, but really it's 6 if you count Peterson and Estrada. So lastly, the DH spot, I think it's no question at all. Jock Peterson is that platoon, start against right-handed pitching, impact DH bat, but as soon as Carlos Rodon's on the mound, or a lefty reliever in that first game of the season, you're going to see the Giants be aggressive with pinch hitting for him, because he has a long track record of being impact against righties, but way below average against lefties. So then on the other side of that platoon is those same guys who are in the mix at first in the platoon with Wade, in J.D. Davis or Wilmer Flores or possibly David Villar or I mean, probably not Austin Slater because you like the defense out there. So it's probably J.D. Davis or Wilmer Flores. Probably J.D. Davis because Davis has not had a track record of being a great defender, but then again, neither has Wilmer Flores. So the pieces fit together pretty nicely, and I'm pretty sure that that's 13 players because I prepared ahead of time. But yes, those are my 13 guys, and that's my prediction. At the catcher position, I'm less certain than I am anywhere else. Going with Sabol and Roberto Pérez. But anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow, including the Giants, so check it out. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Cannot wait to be with you again tomorrow, back to daily on this show. So thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.